Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. As you know, you might have just listened to the episode where I spoke about what happened in Sevastopol because that was a long one, but there's quite a lot of news that are happening still, nonetheless. So if you're listening to this one and you missed the Sevastopol one, which is a bigger analysis of naval subjects, which I'm not an expert in, but you can go and check it out. It's gonna be great. It also explains why I didn't make episodes for a bit. It's because I was getting engaged for you who listened to this before that one. But yeah, hope you're listening to both of these episodes. This one's going to be a bit more organized because I know a bit more about economics and politics than I do know about navies. So that's a thing. But this is recorded just after that one, just so you knew. So some things might change during the day. First of all, just right now, we found out that Europarliament has now adopted a resolution in which the regime of Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus has now been formally declared illegal, and that it's co-responsible to all the war crimes that Russia have been doing in Ukraine, which is interesting because this means that Lukashenko is also now formally judged and Hague awaits him, or so it would seem. However, it's really interesting that it just happened right now. I thought that was happened for a while ago now. But, last time we spoke about all this stuff, well, there were these so-called regional elections and everything. This is kind of crazy. With the campaigning and everything that happened last weekend, yeah, basically everyone avoided talking about Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Few governors and local representatives even mentioned the military operation either on social media or on their speeches. And there was nothing about this. There's just lack of interest. Viestka, one of my sources, investigated this lack of interest of the war in Russian society. And, well, all of this situation ended up being very muted. A lot of people just decided not to. And that was just weird. No one really cared about anything that's happening with the war. Very few governors spoke about this. This just means that in the regions, people are way more worried about their own living. But, have to check on the things that actually happened. Well, obviously, in the so-called elections, which by this point we can just see as a precursor to the upcoming so-called Putin's election, the ruling party, United Russia, reported strong results in all of these Ukraine-occupied regions. Of course they would, despite the fact that they literally forced people to go out and vote under gunpoint. Apparently in Zaporizhia region, 83% voted for United Russia. In both People's Republics, Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, 78% and 74%, and the Kherson region, 74.8%. They don't control the majority of any of these places really, but it is what it is. In all the regional races, of course, United Russia candidates received more than 80% of the vote. Just everywhere. The only governor to win the election with less than 70% of the votes was Valentin Konovalov, the governor of Khakassia, who received 64%. But, however, he was a protest candidate representing the Communist Party in a race against United Russia's candidate, and it was all weird. There were actually some vote outs, some regions, but all these so-called elections, they show a trend with the fact that in central Russia, candidates won more than 80%. 3 out of 5 candidates in the Far East won with 72%. It was always 76%. And all this stuff, this just aligns with the key indicators that the administrations received in advance. Ideally, United Russia candidates were supposed to win more than 80% of votes in central Russia, more than 70% of votes in Siberia, more than 75% votes in the Urals, and all this total nonsense. Very few victories, minor ones with some surprises, and mostly United Russia, of course, no surprises there, absolutely won. Except Yabloko party, the only legitimate opposition party that I think still exists somehow and is still allowed to exist, won some party seats in Yekaterinburg and Veliki Novgorod city parliaments, and its candidates won in single mandate districts in 2 other cities. This year, they, by the way, campaigned under the slogan "For Peace," one of the very few ones who actually spoke about something. And in Yekaterinburg, the party was also recommended by the Smart Vote Project. So something happened. Something. But that's all about it. Of course, tons of these things still went on, total cheating, but just to mention about this. That was important news, obviously, here come from, well, Vladimir Putin once again. He managed to meet with Kim Jong-un. He was invited to go and visit North Korea. Kim Jong-un stated that the glorious North Korean nation will always support Russian struggles against imperialism. And now I have to figure out what will he want in return for providing some supplies and ammo. Because it's just insane when they're having official diplomatic discussions. Just really shameful, to be honest. However, well, Putin also gave a speech at the so-called plenary session of the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok. Interestingly enough, North Korea wasn't invited there as a participant of this forum. They just arrived separately. It's a mess, because I think North Korea seems that they have some other dealings with other countries, and they just are in the power position here, which is interesting. So, Medusa published notable excerpts, which I'm going to read here to you, because this whole thing was 3 hours long and terrible. And a lot of people just complained about him speaking absolute nonsense once again, and it was completely bizarre. On Ukraine's counteroffensive. Let's not talk right now about whether it was a failure or not. It hasn't gotten results. They've suffered losses, big ones. Since the start of this counteroffensive, they have lost 71,500 people. Where is this figure coming from? Putin didn't say. But that's okay, because they always say random numbers which they have pulled out of their own asses. Carrying on. In their own words, they want to achieve results no matter the cost. Sometimes it gives the impression that these aren't their people. Our commanders have told me that from the battlefield we're constantly in contact. Now they, the United States, are going to supply F-16s. Will this change anything? No, it will only prolong the conflict. I think this also proves how much Putin actually knows something about anything. Then on Anatoly Chubai's departure from Russia. Anatoly Chubai, by the way, was leader of Rosnano and everything. And he moved away. And of course, Putin couldn't go out without some casual anti-Semitism here. Quote, the fact that Anatoly Borisovich is hiding there, that's in Israel for some reason. I was shown some photo from the internet where he's no longer Anatoly Borisovich Chubais. Instead, some Moishe Israelovich is living there. Why is he doing this? I don't understand why he ran away. No, that's direct a quote, by the way. That's not some rewording of things. That was a direct quote from that one. He also spoke on the cultural figures who have left Russia. Quote, according to various estimates, there are some journalists, these are the same journalists who calculated that around 160, 170 cultural figures went abroad. They don't agree with the policies of the Russian state. But it's possible to disagree with the politics while remaining here and to talk about it here. Nobody is banning them from doing that. And I'll enter here. Yeah, no one's banning you except you get to be put into prison, and then you might get thrown out of a window, and all sorts of nastiness can happen to you. But otherwise, nothing's banning them from doing that except, total KGB control. Sorry, FSB at this point, but not like it matters. But carrying on from what Putin said. But some people decided they preferred to leave. This isn't just about the views of the people from the art world, it also has to do with material things. After all, in the last 2 years, they've bought houses and apartments abroad and opened accounts there. People want to keep these things. They're afraid to lose them. If a talented person who could be doing something here decides to leave, then sure, we've probably lost something. But on the other hand, I can honestly say that maybe it's better for them to go and work abroad for the interests they want to serve rather than staying here, influencing millions of our citizens and promoting non-traditional values. Because obviously he has to. He just has to. Of course, on Yandex co-founder Arkady Volozh and his anti-war statement. Carrying on with the casual anti-Semitism here, because, oh boy, that's not going to change. Well, he's living in Israel, and I can imagine that in order to live there and have a good relationship with the authorities, he's forced to make certain statements. He stayed quiet for a long time, then he decided to put out a statement. Well, God bless him. Let him have a good life there. It doesn't really affect us, to be honest. If you look at it as a whole, if a person grew up in this environment, received an education, and became successful at something, then his sense of morality should be in the relation to the country that gave him all those things. I'm not talking about Volozh right now. He's a talented person who built a good company and selected a good team. On Alexei Kudrin, who left his post at the head of Russia's audit chamber to join said Yandex, quote, First of all, we don't keep people as slaves. If someone wants to go work in the private sector, we can't force them to stay. He was a good fit, of course, and he was a good finance minister too. But the audit chamber is working effectively. There is an acting director, and the quality of the agency's work hasn't been affected. I think that when the situation matures, when Parliament chooses a suitable candidate, the personal issue will be resolved. On the prospect of a new round of mobilization. We conducted a partial mobilization. 300,000 people were called up. As of now, in the last 6-7 months, 270,000 people have voluntarily signed contracts for service in the armed forces and volunteer units. Oh no. This process is still ongoing. Every day 1,000 to 1,500 people go sign the contract. This is what distinguishes the Russian people, Russian society. I don't know whether this would be possible in another country or not. People willingly go to serve in the military, knowing that they'll eventually end up in the front. The question is, which people are the Russian people in the Cuba where, people are being trafficked and lied to and teenagers end up signing contracts there? You can never know. I guess these are the new Russian people. But then again, at this point, he's been stating nonsense. I really enjoy the fact that he mentioned that it's totally okay to speak against government in Russia. Just amazing. On 2024 elections. By law, our parliament should make a decision on the presidential election at the end of the year. When the decision is made, when the election date is announced, then we'll talk. On foreign agents. He quotes United States effect. This law has been in effect in the United States since 1937. Ours is almost the same, only it's much more liberal. What's a foreign agent in Russia? It's a person who is engaged in public activity while being funded by a foreign state. And this law doesn't prohibit that person from continuing this activity. It just requires them to reveal their funding sources. Which again is a complete lie, just as everything else, because in Russia, foreign agent can be like Yeltsin Center. And journalists. And people who haven't received any money from anyone else. Just, it's a statement. It's nothing to do with this. It's, again, one of those cases of completely twisted understanding of everything. And this is just crazy and so bizarre. And surprisingly enough, he also managed to condemn the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia and Hungary, but stated that they have learned from this. And I don't even know why this was asked, but okay, fine. Because he also mentioned that these are the very same errors that leading Western countries, primarily the United States, make. Of course. I mean, at this point, he's 70 or something, just stupidly bizarre words and statements and casual anti-Semitism just thrown around. It's all just so weird. But finally, the most important part of this, I think, was the fact that he spoke about weaponry, Russian weaponry, which is amazing. Quote, and this is good. Even if we look at the realm of security, weapons based on new physical principles will ensure the security of any country in the near future. We understand this very well and are working on it. Now, Aslanyan, a journalist that works for Khodorkovsky's team, commented on this, stating that, well, obviously, if you take such academicians as Ramzan Kadyrov, they'll create new physical principles of 3 on Friday, 8 until Monday, and then 15 until Wednesday. It's going to be awesome because, they can do anything. They totally promise this stuff. And, he compared it to the fact that if you show a 2-year-old some I don't know, Greek, some sort of fireworks or something, it's going to be the happiest day of their life. And Putin cannot have happiness from just, building a good tank, building a good car, seeing his own people live a happy life. No. He has to have new physical principles and new weapons and everything. And just shows how seriously all this should be taken. At the end of this whole mess, the dumbest part of this was the fact that Putin, in this conference, proposed designating September 30th a holiday commemorating Russia's annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions last year. A bill to create the holiday has been now submitted to the Russian State Duma. The official name of the holiday proposed by the president is Day of the Reunion of the Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk People's Republic, the Zaporozhye region, and Kherson region to the Russian Federation. So, yeah, because that's when they signed the self-installed heads and everything, they signed these papers. And let me remind you, Russia does not control any of these 4 regions. Also, they do not have the volunteers, and they do not have the numbers. They have major issues. They haven't destroyed all that many Bradleys and everything. What was it He said that Russia has destroyed 18,000 armored cars here. This is, again, I think all the Z propagandists are going to be yelling about this situation because it's just pure madness. The guy just does not control what he's saying at all at this point. It's just beyond stupid. Meanwhile, on the news that concern us, even more so, because, well, I have to give you information on Igor Girkin. Yes, our buddy Strelkov, which is awesome. See, a district court in Moscow at this point has extended the pre-trial detention of him until December the 18th, which is my name's day, which we celebrate here. Each of our days in calendar have like a names attached to them. If you don't have your name in the calendar, I think it's like somewhere in February, one of these days. Mine's December the 18th. Awesome. So apparently Russia's Federal Security Service requested this. The agency is mounting an extremism case, of course. And, Girkin's just not getting any relaxation. The FSB argued for keeping Strelkov in custody to give enough time for, quote, expert reports to come in. They want to do psycholinguistic, genetic, fingerprint, and ballistic expert reports. Strelkov's wife, Miroslava Reginskaya, told the Russian outlet Mediazon that she doesn't know what ballistic evidence there is in her husband's case, because that's about a post in Telegram. What? But again, it doesn't matter. I think Strelkov's going to be, Girkin. It's just that everyone refers to him as Strelkov these days, but we have to forget, we do not respect the man enough for that. Anyway, that's just bizarre. They're just going to keep him there. In the course of the hearing, Girkin asked the court to put him under house arrest. He said he's in poor health and has no intention of fleeing from prosecution, which, by the way, is totally true, because if you think about it, he mentions this himself, quote, I'm wanted by Interpol. I have been convicted to life in prison, so the idea that I might flee abroad strikes me as absurd. I also don't think it's possible for me to flee within Russia, since I don't admit the charges and plan to defend my good name and honor in court. Which is a very dumb thing to do, but, who am I to judge this great general? And, in August, this case had been classified, and it was all just bizarre. On August 31st, he also announced all the things that would make him a better candidate for president. This made the Call of Angry Patriots just disassemble, and it was just a massive mess. But now some things about the whole situation with the Russian liberals and why they seem somewhat interesting to deal with sometimes. You see, Estonia just joined Latvia and Lithuania in banning most vehicles with Russian license plates from entering the country. The decision was made after the European Commission issued a set of guidelines for European customs services about implementing sanctions. And this ban, effective September 13, will not apply to buses, motorcycles, or diplomatic vehicles. They're going to do a lot of other decisions and everything, but this angers people. And obviously, Euro Commission kind of asked people to, remove personal items from Russians coming in, like smartphones and cars and everything. So now, no one can enter Latvia and Lithuania with their car in Russia. And, it is a bit harsh. However, it's a security issue, and we are getting a bit paranoid and everything. Of course, we're not that happy about all this situation here. But what strikes me as odd is that, I usually read these things, and I thought, I don't know, letting Russian cars in. Again, it's a mess, and there are reasons for this, why Euro Commission does this. But what's important is that two groups of people, one person, Maxim Katz, the guy who doesn't respond to my mails and whom I follow on YouTube and everywhere, who is one of these, one of my examples of a very annoying so-called Russian liberal. He also isn't in very good relationship with Milov, and it's a bizarre thing, but most of you probably know Maxim Katz at this point. He wrote a letter to European Commission, by the way, and I'm going to read this because that really shows his attitude, like I say, about Russian opposition, liberal opposition in general, and, why they're not loved that much. So, this is addressed to Directorate General for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union Commissioner Mairead McGuinness. Quote, Dear McGuinness, my name is Maxim Katz. I'm a Russian opposition politician, ex-local deputy, and the Russian Opposition Coordination Council member. I was declared by the Russian government as a foreign agent and sentenced to 8 years in prison for criticizing Russian army war crimes. My YouTube channel is well known among Russian speakers. That is true, both inside the country and abroad. That is also true, and is viewed by approximately 12 million people monthly. Well, that's a lot, but I'm not sure if that's true, but it doesn't even matter at this point. He continues, I would like to highlight possible adverse effects arising from the recently published clarifications on the European Union import rules for Russian citizens. On 8th of September 2023, the European Commission issued the clarifications for frequently asked questions concerning Articles 3G, 3I, and 3O of the Council Regulation 833/2014. He will continue on carrying it on in the text as regulation. On import rules of certain products with inter alia clarification if Russian citizens have the right to temporarily bring personal goods and vehicles listed in Annex 21 and subject to the prohibition of Article blah 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 into the Union. I'm not going to read through all these numbers. I am convinced that the flaws in the interpretation of this article, Article 3.1, of the regulation could have dramatic consequences if applied as offered in the answer to question 13 of the frequently asked questions. Firstly, a provided interpretation of the Article 3.I of the regulation contradicts the initial sense, declared objectives, and the text of the regulation itself. Secondly, such an interpretation of the regulation undermines the whole previous effect of the economic sanctions implemented on Russia and is targeted at all Russian nationals, not only at those who might be beneficiaries of the current regime in Russia. Currently, several categories of Russian citizens are legally entering the EU and are not involved in sanctions circumvention. These categories include, for example, political activists on humanitarian visas, students or student visas, employees on work visas, etc. The list of goods prohibited for import by the current regulations includes, and there he bolds, such basic things as women's suits, soaps, telephones, computers, etc., which are necessary for personal use. Confiscating these items will create significant obstacles to entering European Union countries or make the immigration process impossible for the respective categories of citizens. As for the vehicles, it is crucial to leave Russian nationals opportunities to enter the EU states using them due to determination of other means of transportation. Private vehicles are one of the very few available means that allow Russian citizens to leave the country quickly in case of political persecution or new conscription to the Russian army. A decision to prohibit Russian nationals from entering the EU countries on their vehicles could result in more people being unlawfully prosecuted or sent to war forcibly. As you can see, this interpretation hardly aligns with the original goals of the EU, sanctions against Russia. According to Article 3I of the regulation, the import of goods listed in Annex 21 is prohibited only if the import of those goods allows Russia to generate significant revenues, thereby enabling its actions to destabilize the situation in Ukraine. It's hard to imagine that the products brought by Russian nationals for tourist and other non-commercial use would generate any additional revenue or income for Russia. Therefore, their purchase, import, or transfer should be explicitly allowed in the FAQ to the regulation to prevent European Union customs officers from misinterpreting the regulation and not allowing bringing these goods. I agree that the current Russian government should be forced to stop the war through all available means, including economic measures and regulations. However, I believe that sanctions should target companies and persons connected with the Russian government and influence their decisions. At the same time, the current version of the regulations in the FAQ includes wording that needs to be more specific and means that too many cases are left to be determined by the national customs officials. This policy creates excessive uncertainty, which does not benefit anyone but exacerbates the current immigration situation. I invite you to reformulate clarifications in the FAQ on the Council regulation blah blah blah, or initiate amending Article 3I to clearly state that bringing personal goods and vehicles listed in Annex 21 for tourist and other non-commercial use is allowed for Russian nationals. And this is all good and fine and awesome and nice. But then he adds, I'm ready and willing to advise you on how to make the measures more effective. Best regards, Maxim Katz. Okay, dude, I mean, thing is, his points are okay, but there's a lot of issues with the whole situation there. There's a reason why they're not allowed in anymore. There were tons of agents sent in. And we're just trying to make sure that this can be actually regulated and cut off. For one, transit business and all these things, yeah, they're there. And currently, of course, all the Russian Telegram channels and all that, well, they're up in arms about how everything is being, how the big guys can still do everything and how it's just hitting the citizens of Russia. However, this is the point. They kind of don't get the fact that these guys are provocateurs. They're being sent everywhere. And that, just moving abroad to Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, all these places with just your Russian car and everything, it's a bit too late for that. This is wartime measurements. And I don't even know why he's been so up in arms about that. That, again, personal car is the only thing that you can probably enter with. However, again, it's a matter of national security, and the guys in Europarliament are pretty wise about this. Not saying it's the best decision, but hey, I respect these guys because whenever they make something, a lot of debates go on there because Europarlament is not a monolith block by any means. However, the very same fact that he just advises to give expert advice on everything, yeah, I don't know. Again, nicely presuming that he's the smartest kid in the room, but, he should be shown a bit more respect. But at least the letter was worded nicely and showed some problems with the act. However, kind of weird how they write letters about these parts and, well, don't do much to kind of actually note that these people who are in sanctions list, they should remain there. They fight to remove sanctions. They basically want to make their life abroad as easy as possible, which is kind of not what we want. At the same time, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, the Navalny's group, sent a letter to both Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, and everything, and they also wrote about the same thing. It's a way more formal about everything there, and they have a bunch of advice on everything. But from this letter, I'm just going to read the conclusion. This is about how they say that this too is totally unlawful. The EU's economic pressure on Russia to comply with international law is a crucial measure, and the sanctions undoubtedly require strict compliance. However, it's harmful to apply them in a way that fails to achieve their goals, contradicts normative provisions, generates absurd legal conflicts, harms opponents of Putin's regime who are forced to leave Russia, and gives the Russian authorities arguments for the propaganda machine. It discredits the idea of European economic sanctions, wastes state resources to administer them, but with no purpose. Well, that's a bit of a problem there. That's a bit of a problem in all this situation here, to be honest. Because, well, at the same time, we had the Russian television people here and everything, and they started to complain about language things and everything. And, these guys who are Russian opposition, they also stated that Latvia needs a second governmental language. People, I think, it wasn't from Deutsche, but from one of those TV stations who don't work here, they also stated that it should be normal if they could speak in Russian all the time here. It's just that they somehow, yet again, misunderstand the whole idea of why this is done for our national security, and by the way, for theirs as well. In a way, you can't just rent a car here. You can't just get stuff in Latvia as well, or if you even can enter here or something. But it's just a mess. It's just that we've had a lot of these Russian folk over here in EU for doing provocateur things, and there's been conflicts and everything. And yeah, sure, the people on the sanctions list, of course, these sanctions should be enforced even more than they are right now, because I doubt that we should actively be still buying all the goods that we do from Russia at this point. However, just because this happens, I don't know. I think that this is just a case of them worrying a bit much. And these guys are all already outside of Russia anyways. And I don't know what they're going to do. Everyone already has left. I'm not even sure who could still try to come in and visit all these places. It kind of seems meaningless to me to even do all this stuff, but that's the big new issue. But it's, I think, just as pointless right now when the war is going on as all these people who are already dealing the legacy of what's going to happen after Putin all the time. No one even knows what is going to happen to Putin, and most importantly, when. Let us finish this on a more positive note. Have some meanwhile in Russian news, some bigger, some smaller, but all the weird stuff that happened from all the regions all over the place. First of all, a Muscovite woman accused a man in military uniform for discrediting the army. A woman told about an incident that took place in the Moscow subway where a man without a leg, wearing a military uniform, helmet and bandages, approached her. According to the woman, he asked her for money. She then refused the man. After the subway ride, she went to the police, where she said that the citizen in bandages could not be a participant of the special military operation, because those who returned from there are held by the state, that his actions could demoralize other citizens and generally discredit the real participants of the special military operation. That's from RIA Novosti. The deputy speaker of the State Duma Davankov, said that the deputies plan to speed up the development of a bill on compulsory labor for serial snitches. He suggested that the initiative should be named in honor of the head of the Safe Internet League, who tries real hard to be useful to Putin, Yekaterina Mizulina, who appealed to the leadership of the Ministry of Defense with a request to draft a very famous youth blogger, YouTuber of Russia, Danya Mikholin, in the ranks of armed forces. Well, Mr. Mikholin, being 19 years old, didn't want to stay in Russia and go to the front lines. He left the Russian Federation for Dubai without thinking too much about it. And according to Vankov, this deputy speaker of State Duma, Mizulina's request to draft Milokhin, who was reported because he wasn't showing enough of his patriotism, according to this Safe Internet League, quote, scared away thousands of Russians who the country needs now from returning. And I'm surprised because some sort of sanity in the Russian Gosduma, that's something new. Meanwhile, Patriarch Kirill has proven that he knows not that much about the whole history, but what do you want from the old KGB officer Gundyayev? Quote, Peter the Great fought against Western influences aimed at weakening Russia. He realized that St. Petersburg could have been occupied by another power. That's why he created forts. They closed the entrance to St. Petersburg. Peter did not believe in the kindness of his neighbors. It's also the same Peter the Great who went to the Great Embassy and brought in Western influences and built St. Petersburg so it would be Western and had to cut off the window to the West. And so that kind of means that Peter the Great cut open the window to the West and then promptly close it. We let in some fresh air and now that's enough. Meanwhile, the president's special representative, Putin's special representative for digital and technological development, told the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Dmitry Peskov, not the one that the Kremlin spokesperson, we're going to talk about him next, but this guy said something about drones and how much he understands it, and that's cringe of the week for me. Quote, that's why the good Russian word drone, exists. It's almost the same as drin, which, as Evit explained to me, is a large stick, mostly for combat, also slang for, a dick, general one, but only flying. And he added that the function of cavalry right now is performed by by dronitsa, which is kind of like a wordplay of konitsa, which is basically chariot, except now chariots are the drones and everything. And that's fun, and that's kind of weird because digital and technological development and drones don't work that way, but, no one really cares. Meanwhile, Dmitry Peskov, the one who is the spokesperson of Putin himself, said RBK the following in an interview about whether or not Putin will actually run for the elections. Quote, the president has not yet announced that he will run for president. If we assume that the president does not put forward his candidacy, it's obvious that no one can really compete with the president in our country at the current stage. It's like, he's going to win. They all know. And I think they're dropping the whole veneer. And the best for last. Well, especially for you, the Americans. Do you remember Victor Bout? Victor Bout. I don't know how to pronounce him properly. But yeah, apparently, the international arms dealer, who was released from an American prison as a result of an exchange, has now received a mandate in the Legislative Assembly of the Ulyanovsk region. And the list he ran from? Well, of course, nothing else but our Cyber Zhirinovsky party himself, LDPR. It just keeps getting amazing by the day. But yeah, that's it for today. And I hope you enjoyed these news. A bit more coherent than the previous one about the bombing things. But again, been working all night and Evit is a bit angry at me about this, which totally makes sense. I can understand her. But lots of news to cover. At any rate, до свидания, товарищи. And please, if you want to become our patron and support the show, please do it in patreon.com/easternborder or just click the donate button on the easternborder.lv. I'd be very happy if you did, and that would help also with the planning of the marriage and all that stuff. But, let's follow the example of Victor Bout, who has managed to do something with his life. Just because you're an arms dealer and then, you get exchanged doesn't mean you can't always achieve something in your life. Happiness, after all, is mandatory.